So our final speaker today is Michaela Heimbuch, and she is with the University of Idaho working on a graduate degree under Michael Colley. And so she's here today to share some of the research that she's going to be working on for her program, which is evaluating growth, meat quality, and sensory characteristics of wool and hair lambs. That's a tongue twister. All right, yeah. I'll let you take it away. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. As you were just told, my name is Michaela Heimbuch. I am a meat science master's student, and the majority of our lab focuses on beef cattle. However, my project is actually focusing on lambs. That's the reason I'm here to talk to you. But a little bit of background on my project and why it's important in the industry for this to be occurring is we've been seeing a lot of decreasing numbers of sheep in the US over the ages. In 1884, we had our numbers peaking at 51 million head. And in 2016, our numbers dropped down to 5 million, which is a pretty significant change through there. And then also, we definitely have in recent times been having an uptick in lamb, but since the lamb consumption, but since the 1960s, our consumption has dropped from about 5 to 1 pound per capita in the US. So for wool sheep, they're a little bit difficult when you're dealing with meat sheep since they have that shearing. And the reason that this has become an issue in recent days is because there are so many other synthetic fabrics. Sometimes that wool won't really sell for a high price. So based off of the USDA, the average price for wool that was sold in 2020 was about $1.66 per pound. And this includes all different types of wool, obviously. And the meat breeds that we're looking at, such as the Suffolk, a lot of the time will actually have a lower price per pound, in part due to the fact that they have that medium wool. So they have a little bit larger of a fiber diameter and it's a little bit coarser. And then that paired with that darker undercoat sometimes can cause a couple more issues and a lower price per sale. And then the average Suffolk fleece weight is about 5 pounds with 50 to 60% yield. And then tacking that on top of the average price for shearing, which does change based on flock size as well as your location. But average price that we've been seeing is about $5 to $7 per head. So where the hair sheep come into for my project is they have a couple of different things that make them really important and have been part of the reason as to why they're becoming such a new breed in America. So they don't require shearing because they are that hair breed. And so that creates lower maintenance costs for producers, which can be really good considering the fact that meat has not been a super high price recently. And then they're also adaptable to hot climates, so they can be used throughout the US. They also have a high parasite resistance, which once again is just more maintenance costs for producers. And one thing that's interesting to note is that local producers in our area has claimed that the meat has a milder flavor due to this lack of lanolin. And that could be really important for consumers because not all consumers really like that strong flavor of lamb. And that's one of the things that's kind of been driving them away from buying lamb. So the objective of this project is to evaluate a couple of different things. We're evaluating the post-weaning growth rate, the carcass quality, and the shelf life, their tenderness, sensory characteristics, volatile flavor compounds, and fatty acid profile of these different groups. And our wool group is made up of our lambs from a Suffolk Ram and Targhee Polypeg cross ewes. Our hair group is Dorpers and Polypeg Targhee ewes, and then that was our wool hair, sorry. And then our just hair group is Dorpers with a few crosses of Cataldens mixed in, but it's predominantly Dorper. So to start off our materials and methods, we have our rearing section. And this is currently where my lambs are at. They won't be harvested until September and October. But we have 3 different groups. We have 9 wool lambs, 9 wool hair lambs, and then 9 hair lambs. And that meaning they have been fed the same ration and been in the same pens since then. And for harvest, we will have 3 different harvest dates on 3 separate weeks. Our target harvest fat is 0.2 inches of back fat. And we will have 3 lambs from each group going into the harvest at each time. So after they're harvested, they will hang for 48 hours, and then we will start our grading and fabrication. So for grading, we'll be taking measurements of flank fat streaking, conformation. We'll also be taking percent BCTRC, which is that overall yield, or boneless, closely trimmed retail cuts. And for that, we will be measuring their back fat, body wall, ribeye area, as well as hot carcass weights. And then at that 48 hours as well, we will be fabricating and removing that loin muscle. And we will keep that whole where it will age for 10 days. And at the 10-day period, we will cut it into 1-inch double chops, as you can see over on the picture on the right. And then we will have a retail display for 4 days. And then we'll also be doing Warner-Brotzel shear force, which will look into the tenderness of the meat, sensory analysis, which will be a consumer sensory analysis panel, and then volatile compound analysis and fatty acid analysis. Shelf life, this is looking at the retail case. We will have a subjective and objective portion. For our subjective portion, we'll have 3 evaluators who will be measuring lean color, surface discoloration, amount of browning, and bone color. And they will measure it for a period of 4 days. The chops will be weighed, overwrapped, and placed in a retail case where they will be rotated daily after measuring. For our objective color, we will be using a NIX Pro 2 color scanner, and we will be looking at L, A, and B. L is the lightness, A is redness, and B is yellowness of these different chops. And we will look at this once daily while we're also measuring for our subjective. And we will be focusing the camera on the lean tissue, doing our best to avoid fat. And then we'll also be looking at the bone marrow, as these will be bone in. So lipid oxidation is really important. We evaluate lipid oxidation to see if there's any off flavor in the product. So we will be doing this on day 0 and day 4. This ties in with the shelf life to see how long its shelf life would be able to see if its shelf life would last properly for 4 days without any off flavor being created. So for shear force, this is the Warner-Brotzel shear force. Our chops will be cooked and monitored with probes until they reach 160 degrees Fahrenheit. They will then be cooled to room temperature. And after they're cooled, we will use this machine on the right of your screens to cut 1.7 centimeter cores, or to shear 1.27 centimeter cores. And then the force that's required to shear is also the force that's required to chew. For our sensory analysis, our chops will be 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and they will be kept warm until we serve them. They will be served in randomized, covered and numbered cups. And then the panelists will rate the samples on a scale for overall acceptability, texture, juiciness, flavor, and aroma. And I forgot to point out earlier that though we don't have an actual portion where we are analyzing for lanolin levels and causing an off flavor, we have been told by those producers that the hair sheep have that milder flavor, which they believe in part is due to less amount of lanolin production, which possibly is causing that less of that strong flavor. And so our consumer sensory analysis, as well as our volatile compound analysis, will possibly show a difference in flavoring between the groups. So our volatile compound and fatty acid analysis we will send the chops over to University of Arkansas, where we are working with Dr. Virk. And our volatile compound analysis, which is really interesting, actually quantitates the aromas and flavor of the chops once cooked. which is really important, especially with lamb, because there is that milder versus stronger flavor that consumers either seem to really like or dislike. And then we'll also be looking at fatty acid analysis. And this is used to determine identity and quantity of the individual fatty acids, such as omega-3s or monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, for nutritional purposes as well as the chemistry purposes. Our anticipated results is that our wool lambs will have higher growth rates as well as carcass quality. Our hair lambs will have an improved shelf life and higher palatability. And then our crosses will have intermediate characteristics between the two groups of growth, carcass, and sensory. Any questions? And if you guys have a question that I don't entirely know the answer to, I'm more than willing to look it up and get back to you over email.
Sorry, a little slow coming back. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure you're very excited to find out the results to this project. What's your estimated timeline of this project?
Yeah, so my lambs will be harvested throughout September and October. And then we have timeline that all of our lab work and lab analysis, as well as the sensory panels, should be completed by end of December. And then it'll just be the data analysis, putting everything together throughout my spring semester, so January through May. And then hopefully I will be ready to defend in next summer.
Great, so we'll have you back when you have your results. And of course, we're all wondering how we can get on the panel.
Well, our panel occurs at the University of Idaho. And if you would like to be on it, you can email me and I can make sure that I send out an announcement for when it's occurring.
Great. You had a question about why are you cooking the chops to 160 degrees, which is well done, instead of 125 or 135?
We cook it to that temperature because there are different protocols that we're supposed to be following. So we just have to follow these different protocols for cooking and for consumer safety.
Okay. And for consistency in the size of the lambs in your trial, did you consider birth weights at all?
Yes, I do have that as I do have that in my data analysis portion. The groups currently, there is definitely a larger portion in the, or larger lambs for the wool breed. The cross is currently seeming to be in that middle, and then those hair breed, the Dorpers, are definitely coming in smaller. For our birth weights and weaning weights, we attempted to stay anywhere between 18 to 25 kilograms for weaning weights when we were choosing.
Okay.